This is Lloyd Virag, and I'm Rose Virag. And our book is The Reflections of Ukraine, Ukrainian Churches of the Saskatchewan Countryside. And that is strictly books in the countryside. Churches in the countryside, not in towns, villages, or cities. We have a map at the back to show where all the churches in the book are located, in what rural municipalities. There's 10 chapters in the book. Each chapter starts with I got too many things. Here we've got 10 chapters, and this is just an example. There's a picture on each side, and then there's usually about 20 churches in a chapter. I'm Ukrainian. My dad came from Ukraine. I've always attended the Ukrainian Catholic Church. I'm just very interested in these churches and where they're located. And my husband here is Hungarian, but he likes photography, so he did the photographing.
We visited 142 different country churches.
But besides the 142 Ukrainian Catholic and Ukrainian Orthodox, there is 4 churches that aren't that denomination, but they were still Ukrainian speaking, as well as we've got pictures of some of the graveyards with no churches anymore. We tried to photograph all the plaques with information on them, any monuments, plaques, the halls, the cemeteries.
There is a lot of history, and some of the churches are over 100 years old, and they were very important to the Ukrainian people coming to this country. Religion was very important, and it was one of the first, their first main priorities was to build a church. First, of course, they had to build their houses, but church was a very high priority.
They started out with logs, and then after that they kind of used lumber or whatever, but in this book we do have a picture of a log church. But of course, if you want to maybe find
it was built in 1903, and it's still standing.
Its nickname was the Kaplichka, and I do have the picture of it here, I hope. Here's the picture of it right here.
It took us about 4 years. We started about 4 years ago, and it began with just a drive in the countryside, and we drove by and seen the church, and I started taking photographs, and eventually we ended up with hundreds of photographs, and when we talked to people, they asked us why we didn't stick the photos in a book, and when we had to do that, we got more serious about it, and ended up with what we have here.
It's just really a coffee table picture book, and we do mostly just have the dates of when the churches were built, and in some cases there was 2 or 3 churches built, like one burnt down or whatever, or they needed a bigger one for the growing congregation. So we have the dates that the churches were built, where they're located, and we have taken pictures of all the plaques and whatever that do have information on them, and sometimes that includes names of people. And at the beginning, there's a little bit of history and an introduction. And we have also dedicated the book to pioneers, to the Ukrainian pioneers who came approximately 125 years ago. And we have the dedication in both Ukrainian and English. That log one was one of the oldest. I believe that was built in 1903. There's a few of them that claim to be the oldest. Like this one here was built in 1902, and it's an Orthodox one, Ukrainian Orthodox. And I believe on the sign here, it does say that it is one of the oldest Ukrainian Orthodox churches in Saskatchewan. So And here's a picture of the oldest Ukrainian Catholic one. And that was also built in 1902, and that's near Rossthern, Saskatchewan. Well, a lot of them still have services once a year, like for their Prosnik or their Kram. But they also maybe have services for a funeral, or not. Quite a few of them still have services maybe once a month. But of course, they didn't have electric heat or anything, so they're pretty much closed all winter. Well, here we do have a few interior shots, but of course, we weren't able to get into a lot of them. Oh, I think probably one of the things that really, was the fact that they were kept up so nice. The cemeteries were immaculate, the lawns were immaculate. People still took a lot of pride in keeping them up. Well, I think we would say that a lot of them had a certain style, like the cupolas and the domes on top, like they did in Ukraine. And I think that they tried to make the interiors like they were in Ukraine. There was a few churches that didn't have that type of style at all, and some of them were bought from other nationalities, like maybe a Lutheran church, and then they just redid the interiors but kept the exterior the way it was. So there will be a few of them that look like they could be Lutheran or Anglican, but not that many, only maybe a half a dozen or so.
Of course, the Ukrainian immigrants, when they came to Canada, they very much missed their home country, and they remember the churches, how they were built back in Ukraine, and they tried to, as much as they could, copy the architecture and the design of the churches from Ukraine, and thus the title of our book, Reflections of Ukraine. They were the immigrants thinking of their homeland when they built the churches.
Now, this one here is a little bit of an interesting one. As you can see, it's a school as well as a church. That was the only one that we ran into that was both, which certainly was a good idea. I will show you one here. There is some that were pretty big, like this one here.
We call that one the Palace Church because it has some very, very interesting architecture to it.
I would say there was quite a few big ones, Now, if you see on the cover, that one's huge. And this one was built in 1917. So that would be pretty much 100 years old. And it's beautiful. And here we kind of have the full meal deal. That's a nice big church and the hall. There are quite a few big ones.
These churchyards are actually, back in 100 years ago, they were actually a small community within a community because they had their hall where they carried on activities, and of course the church was the center of their religious life, and where they had celebrations for weddings, and then the celebrations of the passing on of the descendants as well.
So here we have a little one, and they're still looking after it, and all the history is on that monument. So you can see the road and what remote locations they are. A lot of them are hard to find, like, unless you went to the rural municipal office and asked for a map, you would have been hard-pressed to find them.
We were able to talk to many people along the way, and we had met some very interesting people, and we were able to understand how the churches, how the communities have changed over the years.
There's a lot of seniors. Now, we're seniors too, but a lot of seniors looking after these churches. And they just refuse to, see them torn down or anything. But it's going to be interesting what happens in the next 15 to 20 years. Because higher-ups are threatening to demolish them or whatever, because there's no attendance there anymore, and they have to be kept up.
There are some sites that are historic sites. quite a few of them actually, but out of 142 churches, there might be 10% of them might be considered historic sites. So there are quite a few that are not, and funds are limited for that kind of designation.
And the government, I don't think, has that program anymore. Here's a church that a lady from Toronto contributed or donated a lot of money to it, to keep it up and to look after it. And she gave the money for all these huge monuments, and she passed away, I guess, just recently. But
they're all the Stations of the Cross.
we had a fairly new vehicle, and it's got so many kilometers on it now that it really devalued it. In fact, we traded one vehicle in for a new one because we thought that would help, but we soon put on a lot of kilometers.
But we certainly would very much like to do the churches in Manitoba and Alberta, because they actually, if you look at the back of the map, they kind of go almost in a wave up in northern Alberta and central Manitoba. And some very, very interesting churches in both Manitoba and Alberta, and we'd love to do them. But the investment is so high that without some kind of assistance, we just wouldn't be able to do it.
Like between the printing and a lady that helped us in Regina, just had it from what we did to the printers, it was over $23,000. We did get a few grants, but,
Still a very large investment.
yeah, we'd love to do it, but, like if we go further away from home, like to Manitoba, we would have to stay in hotel rooms and things like that. Whereas in Saskatchewan, we usually left early in the morning and came back at night. And we always packed a lunch, but if we go to Manitoba or Alberta, we would be having to pay for hotel rooms. And, well, there's very little information out there, and there's very few people, even the priests, that could give us any information, but we should tell Anna.
That's right.
I'll tell you one, at the back of this book, Marie Baran wrote a book. It was titled Ukrainian Catholic Churches of Saskatchewan. She put it out in 1977, and it's a book about all the Ukrainian Catholic churches in Saskatchewan. And she went into a lot of detail, like of who the original people, who designed, who the priests were, who lived there.
With our book, we ended up with 320 pages with pictures and a little bit of information at the front. So we really felt that was more important than putting in a lot of detail. And the old saying is a picture's worth 1,000 words. So with all the pictures, there are lots of words in the book.
But like I say, this book is in the libraries. That Anna Maria Baran's book is in the libraries. And it is very detailed, but she only did the Ukrainian Catholic Churches in Saskatchewan. But she talks about design and the people who lived there and, what the interior looked like. Like, there's no pictures of the interior, but she described how it looked, what it was made out of, who gave the icons and all that kind of stuff. I wish there would have been like that one on the Orthodox churches, but we couldn't find it. Well, we have received just a tremendous amount of compliments from everybody who has bought it. They feel it preserves the churches, because about 6 of them that are in here are destined to be demolished.